Welcome back, guys. Module 8. Here we go. So, we're going to talk about sleep today, and then we're going to talk about what we call NEAT. So, let's get into it. So, let's start with sleep. There's a strong relationship between the increased obesity rates in our country and the amount of sleep. We don't sleep as much. There's a lot of reasons for that, and that doesn't really matter right now. But we do know that those who report less than 7 hours of sleep compared to those that report 7 to 8, they possess a higher BMI. Why? There's a lot of reasons for this, and we're going to highlight some of these and talk about what we can do to change that. Well, one of the reasons was highlighted in this seminal study by Spiegel in 2004. What he did is he put people on an extreme sleep restriction, 4 hours per night. And he did this for a while, and he measured these hunger hormones. Ghrelin, this is a hormone we've discussed that's released from your stomach. And then leptin is another hormone we've brought up that's released from your fat tissue. And when ghrelin goes up, you get really hungry. When leptin goes down, you get really hungry. And they found a 30% increased level in ghrelin and almost a 20% reduction in leptin, meaning one of the reasons that lack of sleep leads to obesity is it shifts this hunger hormone profile such that you're hungrier. So, one, we're hungrier. The second, and almost most important, is this concept of maybe we just have an increased opportunity to eat, meaning, this study took 16 young subjects, put them on a 2 week trial. And what they did is 1 week they had them sleep 9 hours per night. So that was kind of the long sleep duration. And then the second week they had them sleep 5 hours per night. And they told them you can eat whatever you want. Like they had food to eat that had nothing to do with it. It's just they had them sleep either 9 or 5, and then they allowed them to eat whatever they want. And what did they find? Well, here's 5 day average food intake. One, they ate more. They ate from three, this is only a 2 week study. Okay. So note that they were eating about 3,000 calories a day, and they went up to about 3,200 calories a day. That did impact weight gain. Now, if you look at the y axis, it's very little, but again, it's because it was only a 2 week study. And actually, they've only measured over 5 days. But nonetheless, they gained weight. Now, the thing that I want to highlight here is this. They looked at, well, when did they eat more of their food? So this is on the y-axis is the 5 day average energy intake. And we see breakfast, they actually decreased food intake at breakfast. They didn't eat lunch. They didn't eat more at lunch. They didn't eat more at dinner. They didn't have more daytime snacks. It was all post dinner snacks. The biggest reason that lack of sleep causes obesity is you're eating during that time that you should be sleeping. We've already discussed that you should not be eating late at night. Honestly, I think this through. Whenever you stayed up later than normal, I would venture that you are always snacking on something. You're always eating something. And usually those things that you're eating, it's not like you're staying up late watching your Netflix show eating broccoli, right? And so it's these post dinner snacks that's causing issues. And so that's the biggest reason that lack of sleep is probably contributing to obesity. What do we know? We know that research in children has shown that if we increase sleep in kids, they actually decrease BMI. So now we have evidence that tons of evidence that if you don't get enough sleep, you'll increase BMI. But now we want to know, okay, let's say I don't sleep a lot, and now I start to sleep better. Can I lose weight? Well, there's some good evidence in kids that that's the case. Adults that were eligible for the National Weight Control Registry, remember, these are the people that were successful at keeping weight off, showed that successful weight loss maintainers had better sleep than those that didn't lose or didn't keep the weight off. We also know that at the beginning of a weight loss program, those that received more than 7 hours of sleep were more likely to lose weight. And we know that increased sleep duration by 1 hour causes an additional fat loss of roughly 2 pounds. And so, yeah, there's also good evidence now that, okay, if you're getting bad sleep now, get better sleep and it will help you. You won't be as hungry, you won't be eating as much at night, and hopefully we can lose more weight. In addition, we know that when you don't sleep a lot, that impacts the quality of weight that you lose. Meaning, one study showed that when subjects weren't sleeping a lot, they lost more protein. Remember, protein is muscle mass. So the subjects when they compare the two different groups, the amount of weight between the group that slept fine versus the group that didn't, they lost the amount of weight. But if you look at, okay, well, what percent of that weight was fat versus muscle? The group that wasn't sleeping a lot, they lost a lot more muscle. And so now we have this other factor that comes into play. Remember, if we lose more muscle mass, our metabolism goes down. Well, what about you guys that say, well, I'm just the night owl? Well, in reality, from a weight loss perspective, there's no such thing. Don't get me wrong. Some people are more alert at night, but meaning still, that's not going to do you good from a weight standpoint. Going to bed later in the night, independent of total sleep time, relates to obesity. So meaning if you go to bed at midnight every night, but you still wake up at 8, that's 8 hours of sleep, that still relates to obesity. That's not the way your biological clocks were intended to be. And you're probably eating in the wrong time period. Research has looked into whether or not people who were morning people are night people, and they found that individuals who reported that they were night owls, they had increased risk for obesity. And so it's, I don't care who you are, you should go to bed earlier. And by earlier, I mean 10 o'clock or something like that. It's a normal time, and get up at a reasonable hour, 6 o'clock. That is the ideal way that the body functions. Now, we spend all this time on lack of sleep and obesity because that's the problem, but there are those who do get too much sleep. 18% of the population sleeps too much, and sleeping too much is what we say is greater than 9 hours a night. That also actually relates to obesity, which this should make sense. Sleeping is the most sedentary thing that you can do. If we do need it for recovery, but if you do too much of it, then energy expenditure is going to be decreased. In addition, we know that those that report this much sleep, they say that they're more tired throughout the day, and so they're probably not moving as much. So when we talk about sleep, we really have this U-shaped relationship where too much or too little, since both are not good. And that's why we always say 7 to 8 hours. That's the goal there, 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I do want to show you one more study that kind of highlights this concept of, well, what if I'm not sleeping good? Is increasing sleep going to help me? This was an interesting study. So on average, if you're not trying to change your weight, let's say you're not trying to gain weight, you're not trying to lose weight, you're just okay at your status quo, you're going to gain about 2 pounds a year. That's what we see, about 2 pounds a year. So I guess I could say it's normal for us to gain weight over time. What these researchers did, though, is they said, well, does the amount of weight that someone gains over time, can we predict that based off of the quality of sleep that somebody gets? And so they did a study where they followed people for 6 years. And in the beginning of this study, they took all their subjects and they classified them into 2 groups. You're either a good sleeper or a bad sleeper. And then they measured them at 3 years and then again at 6 years. And then they split it up to the people that decided that they wanted to, maybe at the beginning of the study, they were crappy sleepers. And then 3 years later, they said, now I'm going to change and I'm going to sleep good. Okay, so now we have, okay, they switched and now they're a good sleeper. So now we have 3 groups. We have people that were continuously good sleepers. We have people that were continuously bad sleepers. And then we have people who were bad sleepers and they became good sleepers. That's what we care about. We want to know, will changing my behavior stop weight gain? So here's changes in BMI. Here, the group that maintained the short sleep schedule, that's the bad group, they gained the most amount of weight. Okay, the group that slept the best for the whole 6 years, they didn't gain nearly as much. But what we care about is this group right here. This was the group that they were bad sleepers, but then they changed something. They didn't gain as much weight. They also didn't gain as much fat mass as the other groups, and their belly wasn't as big as the other groups, or that it didn't increase as much. And so we do have good evidence that changing from sleeping poorly to sleeping better can impact your weight trajectory over time. So what are we going to do about sleep? So lack of sleep, take-home message, lack of sleep leads to increased hunger, promotes eating during the evening. We know that, and we shouldn't eat during the evening. You should strive for 7 to 8 hours of sleep. The time you go to bed every night and awake every morning should be consistent. That's other data that I didn't really get into, but it is important. You should be consistent. You should be on somewhat of a schedule. I go to bed at 10 at night, wake up 6 in the morning. Decreased sleep leads to muscle loss that lowers energy expenditure. If you must stay awake longer than usual for some reason, you need to make a concerted effort that you're not eating during that time period, um, if you must. So what's the application here? I want you guys to do an assessment that gauges your sleep schedule so that you can then set goals to improve it. In your 24-hour weight loss planner, I have this survey. This is a very common survey used in the scientific literature. It's called the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. Take as much time as you need and go through here and fill it out. It asks you a whole bunch of different questions. The whole survey isn't here on this slide presentation. I just took a snippet, but it is in your book. And so fill it out, and then I want you to score yourself. I wish that they made the scoring much simpler. They didn't, but I think you guys are smart. You can figure it out. You just put your score for what number 9 was. Okay, so that one, you'll, on question number 9, whatever that was, put that there. Number 2, if you slept less than 15 minutes, your score is a 0. 16 to 30, it's a score of 1. You can go through there. And then it's telling you to add that to 5A. And so it is very cumbersome, but if you just read the directions clearly, you can get your score. Then you write your total score there. If you have a total score greater than 5, then that indicates that you have very poor sleep quality. If you do, you need to set goals to fix that. And some of you may not even need to use this. I know that there's so many, all of our watches now, a lot of them gauges sleep, and that may give you an indicator. And so if you have poor sleep quality, then let's do something about it. Again, this is in your in your book. I was gonna say text. I guess it's your text. But here's a lot of different tips. I won't read this verbatim, it's in front of you. But there's a lot, this is called sleep hygiene. There's a lot of tips and things that you can do to improve sleep quality and quantity. You want to sleep, length is important, but quality is also important. And so go through here and see if you can change anything and set some goals if you need to improve sleep. All right, so I'm gonna, that's part 1 of this module. I'm gonna stop this and then I'll see you for part 2.